Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I to the Chips and Bits podcast. Oh boy, I am your host Kenny Myers, and with me as always,
Matthew Anderson.
And I just want to get through some business first. First, a huge shout out to Alice, our number one Patreon this month, for just being the best. We really appreciate you and all the money you're spending on this foolish endeavor. You too can join us on this foolish endeavor. Not Alice, because she is, but the rest of you, by joining our Patreon, which is patreon.com/chipsandbits. And that's A-N-D, not N. We have a mix up of names. So our website, you can find it easier at chips-and-bits.com, or you can ask us on Twitter at chipsnbits. And that's one word. Matt, how are you?
I'm great. I'm happy to be back with you and with the podcast listeners. I'm coming to you live from Vashon Island, so outside of my normal recording studio in a wonderful, more like bright cabin atmosphere. So I hope I look as good and sound as good as I normally do.
Probably not. Okay. You look fine. I also, sorry, my apologies to everyone. This is one of the few times we've missed the podcast date because I was actually I had a really nasty cold. Not COVID. I got tested.
That's good.
And they said no. They said, no, don't come for testing again, Kenny, you paranoid asshole. And with that, how about we play some music, huh? So pleasant. Today we get to talk about Returnal. Matt, I want you to take charge on this one. Mostly because my voice is probably going to go out in the next 5 minutes, but also because I'm really curious where you landed with it.
Happy to. I'll try and give you as much space as I possibly can. I think if I was to start, so the long story short, here's how I'll try and tee up this review for
Boy,
Kenny.
The long story short is really the problem with Returnal, isn't it?
It really
what it should have aspired to be.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Returnal, man, it is a really good, compelling, fun, unique take on sort of a multiple different genre style thing again. Mainly, the whole it's leveraging from several other games that we've played recently as well. Good gun mechanics, excellent visuals. For the most part, feels like a fairly polished game. And yeah, it's just really, really good. And I anticipate that an overwhelming majority of people that will play this game would never make it through to arriving at that conclusion due to what this game asks of people that play it in order to arrive at that kind of conclusion. Because as much praise as I could heap on the absolute final end result of this game, it is almost to an extreme fault buried in terrible pacing, horrible leveling mechanics, an absolute grind of a world play system and leveling pace. It attempts to tell some sort of story when it doesn't need to, and it is over grandiose and absolutely obtuse in its storytelling until the very end, which, as I just proclaimed, unless you make it to the very end, which I struggle to believe most people who play this game would, you're gonna have no idea what's going on. Also, for a rather AAA version of a small game like this, several performance issues, plenty of bugs. There you go. There's your tee up, Kenny.
I would say Returnal was way too long. Like it was just way too long. It wasn't really particularly gratifying to like figure things out. So my mic's going bananas right now. Sorry. Um, but the biggest thing that I noticed is it just I think there's this midpoint in the game where you've spent a lot of time getting through three what they call biomes.
Hmm.
Um, and that's enjoyable. And then you go through this whole sequence that's really like vague and weird. It's still sort of not very transparent in what you're doing on this planet. Uh, and oh boy, my thoughts are going slower than normal, Matthew. Slower than
It's
normal,
okay.
which is like they're usually slug pace. Now they're like dead slug pace.
It's a
Uh,
great game.
uh, they're you reboot in a new area, but it's just the same old area, like with plants
Hmm.
is how I would describe it. And to like take so long to get there and to just be rewarded with essentially the same place is obnoxious. I did appreciate how biome 5 and 6, there are 6 biomes, were at least a little different. But like way more half baked.
Yeah, there's just like instead of having this entirely procedurally generated world of ice, let's just drop you into this hub, and you can go down a couple of pathways, and then go to the next biome.
Yeah, you just essentially get in the arena,
Yeah,
enter the arena. And also the last area was a fucking water area. Like
yeah,
and it subverts a lot of the mechanics and then makes you play in that subversion for the last boss. Well, it
yeah,
slows them
yeah.
down a little bit.
Because some of the greater points of this game are, you've got to jump. You've got to jump. Wow, was there thunder where you're at? Oh my
No.
gosh, a
Was that
huge
thunder?
thunderclap. Yes. Um,
Congratulations.
Sorry, not normal for those of us in the Pacific Northwest here. But yeah, some of the greater points of this game are sort of the mobility aspects of the game. You've got a booster pack. The jumping is fairly good fidelity. It's really easy to move around. The movement, the gunplay mechanics, pretty tight, pretty fun to play once you get used to them. And then to Kenny's point, you play hours and hours and hours of getting good at this jump and dash and deflect mechanic, only to, for the very final level, be thrown into a gravityless, bubbly water zone where you don't leverage all of the key learnings that you've gained over hours and hours of playing this thing. And it's kind of a weird choice.
Yeah, I once a friend asked me, I think it was Lord Scotland actually asked me,
Yes.
is it like a Game Pass game? And I was like, yeah, this is like Game Pass game. Like you can wait until it shows up on Game Pass. Like not Game
Yeah,
Pass, but
sure.
like PlayStation Plus. Like it's just like it's very it's very much like a indie game trying to be a mature like a AAA game.
Hmm.
And while it looks great and it feels really nice to play, like it feels really nice to run around, it just reuses a lot of assets and it doesn't have a lot of variety and the story points. I don't know. What one of the biggest problems I had is it's a roguelike, which means that you kind of start over from the beginning. Uh, but like by the time you get to the third biome, there's nothing really you can do to get better, like permanently. Like you get all the unlocks. Well, you get more unlocks later, but like they take forever to get, and they're not really that valuable. And they don't like improve your weapons or your fighting. Like the further you progress, the more it's just like, well, you're gonna have to just get better at going through this round, and there's nothing really interesting about what you're doing. Like the mechanics are the same, the weapons are relatively the same, uh, but you can't like in Hades where you could unlock certain things or power or level up things. Like there was something really enjoyable about that. Or same with Dark Souls. Like Dark Souls, you can iterate and level up permanently and get items permanently, and that sort of progress, even though you're recycling over and over and over again, is super fun. And I know that traditional roguelikes are very much like go as you can. Like I think Dead Souls, what's the one?
Dead Cells.
The Yeah, Dead Cells. That is more like this mechanic, right?
No, I mean Dead Cells is a lot more like what you were just mentioning, which is that like it's random what you're going to gain, it's random which things are going to be transient or permanent, and it's very straightforward. It's brutal in its presentation. There's only start to finish, and if you die, you start all over again. It's very simple, so it's less
It's more like
approachable.
Returnal.
Yeah, it's more approachable, probably more irritating even than the Returnal grind. Um, but it takes it on the chin. Like I actually feel like the presentation of Dead Cells and what it's trying to do as a game, much better interpretation and attempt at being true to what they're trying to do than Returnal, which seems to be trying to do way too many things with a simple mechanic, and also trying to do other things that games that have very recently come before it just did so much better. I mean, if anyone wanted to come to a game like Hades, for example, and say it was too grindy, or say the fighting mechanics were good enough, well, then you had like character and story that just no other game can compete with, right? So there was all these different elements of these recent games that we've played that if one of them is kind of lacking in one area, the rest of them are just so strong and compelling they'll pull you through it. And in Returnal, the one thing I think that it had going for it was a really good interpretation of a gunplay system and a bullet storm style gameplay, and it was really good at that. And then it just didn't. None of the other parts of the game served that main component very well. In fact, all of them sort of pulled away and distracted from it in a way that you almost couldn't appreciate what was really good about the game.
Yeah, coming back to Dead Cells a little, I even remember that they have a leveling up mechanism. You have
Mm-hmm.
stats that you can level up, potions and stuff,
Yeah,
and then they like the hub world gets more people. There's no real sense of like long term progress in Return. It's just like you do the grind. They don't even
yeah.
have a
Well,
save
they're
mechanism based on
no,
where you are.
yeah. Their Returnal's version of it is you can permanently unlock um, attributes that you will definitely find, like that are findable to you. But like that's not the same because like if then what you stick in front of me are irritating grindy roadblocks that an average person, unless they're doing a podcast about this game, just are not likely to overcome,
Right. And
then that's
require
of zero.
random number generation.
Yeah, it's of zero value to you.
Yeah. It was which made made like uh we talked a little bit about this, but there was this point around biome 3 where it just I felt like this game was never going I was never going
Right.
to get through this game. Like it was so exhausting and so like I'd gotten mechanicked out. I learned all the places. It was super like I had all the guns that I had up to that point. And it was just so I like I remember when this game came out, we talked about whether or not we would review it, and then you were like, "Wait and see." And I
Mm-hmm.
think you said yes right at the point where I was also the most excited to play this game. It was like you get to biome 2 after beating the first boss, and you're just like, "Oh, cool! This will be really fun." Uh, the boss was cool. Yeah, let's keep playing this. It feels really good to play. It does just feel really good to play.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's super fun and it gets in a really good zone in terms of like uh it's like almost peaceful to play, like you just get really transfixed with it and it just becomes kind of rhythmic, uh but then it takes forever, and I just thought it was
Yeah.
funny. I remembered that. I remember when, because you're really the guardian of our reviews,
Yeah. Yep.
and I was like, I was surprised you said yes, but I was like, oh cool, well then it must be worth keep going if Matt's played, because you played ahead of me. And then by the end of it, I was just like, I just want to end this fucking game.
Yeah. Well, in hindsight, probably the pinnacle of achievement in this game is the first boss. I mean, I think if you're going to, hold up a good example of when everything works in concert with the gameplay and the bullet storm mechanic, you feel like in the first area you are learning so much. You're learning how to play the game. You're learning what these different things do. You're spending about I would say on average, like you have to go through it 6 to 10 times before you ever even hit the boss the first time, and then you'll definitely die. And it has that learning mechanic where you feel like even though you're doing some repetitive actions and it's a roguelike, that you are improving. You are getting better at the game, and that in and of itself take all the other distractions aside, is enough of a compelling mechanic at first that you like really want to play the game and beat that first boss. And that is the only time that it feels that way. Every world and every boss after that, I just felt like, so I've beaten the first boss, I get to the next biome, and now I'm just putting hours in, right? I don't
Yeah,
feel like I'm getting any better at this game at any
right.
point after the first boss. And like, how are you supposed to like get a player base to move through 5 other levels and 5 other bosses if that's the case? I mean, I just don't think there was very much thought put into that. Or this is one of those, and sometimes we talk about games where it's like, this needed to be like an early release game,
Yeah.
so that they could pivot hard in certain areas and really like fine tune a lot of the aspects of the game. This strikes me as just the perfect example this year of a game that needed to do that somehow, get some critical feedback so that, you know, the good parts of the game had an opportunity to shine. I really do find it hard to believe that a majority of people played this game anywhere past the second or the third level, and that's not even half the game.
Uh yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I mean, if I were to remake the game, I would make it like a boss rush game. Like where you just fight different bosses like Cuphead cuz the boss design
Mhm.
was phenomenal. Like it was just they were just cool looking at the bare minimum even if they had their own frustrations. And in fact, this game might have one of my top 5 favorite bosses and lead up to him in the organist
Oh yes,
boss,
very very
which
cool.
I just I'll we don't do show notes anymore, but man, I might have to interrupt our YouTube to show it. Uh,
Sure.
it is just one of the most phenomenal looking bosses I've ever played against. Like, and the sequence and it's playing an organ and it's kind of tendrilled to it. It has a bunch of tendrils, and then in its second wave, it like detaches itself, and the organ music stops. The organ music is a big part of the level, and then it like when it gets to like down to 1/3 health, it goes right back to the organ, and the organ starts again, and it's just so. I just really love organs. I guess like that's just the. Just, we should make a shirt that says "Chips and Bits." Kenny really loves organs.
Well, you only just alluded to what was my favorite part of the sort of the setup for that boss as well. Just sort of like the vibe of the boss, and that's like when you first start that biome, you're commenting on the fact that like you just keep hearing this creepy music. Where is this organ music coming from? And you only hear it from time to time, and you kind of forget about it after the first couple of plays. And then you hit that boss in that biome for the first time, and you see that it is the boss literally playing an organ, and that is the music you've been hearing. And so all of a sudden you're like, oh right, that's the organ music that I've been hearing. And typically in those scenarios, you you never really think about it after that. But in this way, the way that it's set up, it also serves as sort of like a location, or sort of because again, another thing we haven't really talked about is one of the other arguably strong points of this game is that all of the worlds, even though they have their own themes, are procedurally generated, so they're never the same. There's certain aspects of them that are the same, most of
They're
it.
kind of the same.
they're they're kind of the same. That's why I'm saying arguably it's one of its better points, because there's some good stuff about it, there's some questionable stuff about it,
I
but
don't know if I would say procedurally generated. I mean, I know that they are
randomly assigned
yes,
rooms,
that's
randomly assigned rooms.
randomly aligned next to each other because they get very samey.
Yes, but what it does do is, because they're randomly assigned, there are time like the best way I can describe it is that it's just as likely that you get off, you start the level, and within like 3 rooms, you find the gate to the next one, to the next biome, as it is you have to go through 60 rooms.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's really long, sometimes it's shorter. And in that particular biome, because of the organ music, after you realize that there's that connection to the boss, it helps set your expectations for actually how close you are to reaching the end of the level. So in subsequent playthroughs of that particular biome, as the music starts getting louder or more frequent, you're like, oh, cool, I actually must be getting close to the boss, even though I've only been through 5 rooms, which is cool. So that was one of my favorite aspects of that boss.
uh, I would get like it was so funny because the bosses were probably the best part of the game, in my opinion. Well, like the actual like fluidity of combat's really fun, like the arcadey feel. But as far as presentation, I thought the bosses were phenomenal. And it's so funny because Biome 5 doesn't have a fucking boss.
Yeah, that was. I was texting another friend of mine who was struggling with the game and just asked, "Are you still playing this?" Or we were talking over text,
Yeah.
and I remember that night very clearly because I was like, "Yeah, I'm about to get to the fifth boss for the first time," and he was like, "Good luck." And then like 30 seconds later, I wrote him back. I was like, "Made it to the next level." And he was like, "Wow, that was fast." I was like, "Yeah, there's no boss for no reason in in the fifth biome. There's just they're like, no,
It's like the lost in pre-production or something like that,
yeah."
which
I was
was so
like,
silly. I don't know, man. Like,
questionable decisions, man. That's all I can say. It's one of those it's one of those games where it's just I'll be honest, like the hardest part for me is just trying is like getting to the end of it, knowing what a huge like goof fan I am of video games and how many games we have played, and just trying to as best I can just take my ego out of the situation and imagine like, yeah, if I was in that room with that crew, I would have missed all these things too. Like no person could have immediately identified that these were core problems in a game that should have never seen the light of day. But it just strikes me as that way. Like they just seem like such glaringly obvious holes with a single playthrough. That is just hard to believe that with all the other good stuff, all the graphic fidelity and the bullet storm and like the fighting mechanics, the gunplay is really good, and yet you missed such obvious holes. In my opinion, it just seems strange.
I guess the story, uh, the whole plot, like by him too. I think I was pretty
You
sure I knew
did?
what we
I
were
still don't
doing.
even.
Yeah,
I still can't even say that for sure. I know what the hell they were trying to communicate with that story.
I mean, it's ultimately a game about grief and guilt. Uh, but yeah, no, and also there's you didn't probably look it up, but did you look up the secret ending?
I played through to the secret ending, Kenny.
Oh, you went and collected all six of the
I sure
sundials?
did. I did the whole
Wow.
thing.
Wow. Okay. Well, I did not because I was like, I'm done.
So to be fair, what I told myself when it was over, because there is a little bit of a teaser at the end once you beat the game, um, that like if you want to keep going, here's some things you can collect, but you got to collect these things. And I said, you know what? That I'll do it. I'll give it one try. I'll give it one try. We'll see how far I get. And I happened to go right through it the next time, and do it on my first attempt. So
Wow.
if I hadn't done that, I probably wouldn't have done it, but I did.
I did that too and I died.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So, uh, yeah, man, I don't even know if I would recommend this game. Like,
I don't think I would. I really don't. And I know it's like most of the time. There's even I'll recommend it just with a strong caveat.
or
I
like for an
just
audience.
right for a particular audience. I just think that what this game asks of a regular person is just it's just too much. Like it's just too much for an average person who's just into video games and even likes tough stuff.
Well,
Um,
we're not targeting an average person. We're targeting
yeah, yeah.
people we want to play it.
I guess what I'm revealing with that kind of comment is I can't think of one. I can't think of a particular group that I would be like, yes, you would probably like this, but I just don't think. I think it's just a random. It's a random assortment of people that might like this game. I don't know who they are, um, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
It feels like a big pocket of time for very little
It really
satisfaction.
does. Yeah,
For
huge
very
pocket.
little satisfaction, like way longer than it should have been. Man, so there we go. It's like our first not recommend both of us in a long time.
It feels like it's been a while, yeah, but this
Yeah,
definitely feels like it's worthy of the stamp.
we'll say it's definitely better than XCOM the Bureau. Like as a general rule.
But
Uh,
really, on a long enough timeline, I mean,
but at
everything
least
is better than.
XCOM the Bureau knew when to stop. You know,
Uh huh.
so much
Yeah.
so that they didn't even finish the game.
They're just like, man, we give up.
They're just like, oh, we're out of money. Okay, well, this is a shorter one. Don't play Returnal. Uh, this is the Chips and Bits podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Sorry about the cold, and think I'm still working out some audio issues as well as some internal issues that I'm struggling with, which I'll share on my other podcast, the one without Matt.
Did you want to plug that one quick?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
It's Kenny's secret podcast.
Dot
Anyway,
com.
.com .pizza,
That
which is a
pizza.
real domain name. Uh, yeah, and so I'm Kenny Myers, and with me, unfortunately,
Matthew Anderson.
and thank you for listening to us. And let's
See you. See you soon.
let's cue some music, huh? Huh? Woo! Oh no! I deleted the song. Hold on, it has to upload. Okay, let's cue some music.